Kia ora tātou. Ko Rimataka te maunga, ko te awa kārangi te awa, no whakatiki ahau. Ko Weaver toku whānau, ko Andrew toku wingawa. Hello, welcome, and thank you, Georgia, thank you, Ashton, and thank you, Leah, as well, for all the work that you've done to get us here today. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you a little bit about trust, and trust as it relates to security. So my name is Andrew Weaver. I'm the Executive Director of an organisation called Digital Identity New Zealand. I'll give you a brief précis of that in a sec. But I just wanted to refer back. I started with a very brief pipiha. And when we're talking about identity, I actually just told you who I am. I told you where I was from, my mountain, my river, which is up the valley here. That's where I'm pointing, I hope. Yep, up that way. And also my family, and finally me. So placing our identity, which is a key component of security, in the context of who we are, where we live, who we relate to, is an incredibly important aspect of what we do. It's a really human aspect of what we do. So we're constantly thinking about cyber, we're thinking about the digital threats. But at the end of the day, it's people who we're protecting, and it's people who we need to take on a journey with us so that they're equipped and enabled to do what they need to do to remain safe and to do what it is they want to be doing online in the first place. So a little bit about Digital Identity New Zealand. So we're an organisation, it's a stakeholder organisation, so members are different organisations within, predominantly within Aotearoa, New Zealand, but a few internationals as well. Triple S, for instance, is one of our members, one of our founding members. We also have government agencies. We work closely with the DIA and our Digital Identity Transition Program team there. I'll talk a little bit about that later. And you know, we've got banks, we've got technology companies, we've got startups, we've got government agencies who are involved. And the idea is to collaborate. It's to support the development of a digital identity ecosystem. I'll talk a little bit about that too. That's a bit of a buzzword. Actually, talking about buzzwords, you've got bingo cards. I just used one of the words because identity's on it. That may be the only one I use. There may be one other one I use as well, but yeah, keep an eye on your bingo cards. It's going to be a fun part of the day. Basically, the idea of digital identity as an organisation is to seek to collaborate, work together to improve a whole lot of things. Productivity, to improve security and improve trust, to actually enable people to do what they want to do online. But further than that, give them the ability to have some semblance of control and ownership, if we want to use that word, about what they're doing, their digital presence and how they're using it. More and more privacy has come into our conversations when we're talking about security. Consent, very closely linked to privacy as well, and how that operates. And then participation as well. There are marginalised components of our society who still don't have access regularly to internet or broadband even, and finding ways that we can actually be inclusive in the work we're doing. And shout out too to Triple S. Your intern program is a great example of something that you're doing as an industry to bring the next generation on board and to increase the representation and the diversity in what we're doing as well. So that's a little snapshot. We've got a website. You can go and look at the website, all that sort of stuff. We're part of the Tech Alliance. A lot of you will be familiar with this, so the NZ Tech family, if you like. Here are the various associations that are involved. Tech Women, some of you will be familiar with. NZ Tech runs Tech Week every year. There's an AI forum, there's a FinTech New Zealand, there's a whole bunch of associated sister organisations working together. So we're part of that family. Now, what I'm going to talk about mainly today is a piece of research. So when we started, Digital Identity New Zealand has been around since the end of 2018. And when we started, it's like, what are the challenges we're facing? What do people actually understand about trust and identity when we're talking about their online presence? And so the idea was formed that we would actually conduct a piece of research. So we partnered with a firm called Yabble and sponsored a piece of research which helped create a bit of a benchmark of people's understanding and perception and indeed their feelings and attitudes around trust and identity when it comes to their online presence. So we did that in 2019. We repeated the survey again last year, 2020. This is the 2020 findings that I'll talk to here. And we're going to be doing it again this year. So the idea of this is we've got a measurable benchmark. We can actually see where the dial is shifting. And there's some interesting characteristics which came out as part of the research last year. So we started forming up the framework for the research about this time last year, so about in February last year. And obviously things happened and we were all shut down and isolated for a little while. It changed our approach a little bit, certainly changed our timing, but interestingly we saw some of the results play out in the research as well, particularly this one. So we actually conducted the research in May last year, so it was after the major lockdown period. And obviously what that had done was force a lot of people to think about how they access these services. And that came out in the results where there's an increasing number of New Zealanders who are looking to primarily access their services through whatever organisation, banking, talking with a government agency, schooling, education, whatever it might be, are seeking to do that online as a first point of call. Whereas in the past it traditionally has been face-to-face first point of call. So that's a good thing. If we're doing it in a way which actually enhances or increases their security and their ability to perform those services. So there is an increasing desire, and even more so now. I think we're seeing that continue, and we'll see that continue, which actually puts the pressure back on you guys because you're at the forefront. So as your product teams and as your organisations seek to do more stuff digitally and customer facing in the online presence, then it increases the work that you need to do to secure those channels. Now, touching on this point about control and ownership, about digital identity. Digital identity is an amorphous thing. It's a really hard thing to actually put your finger on. In very simple terms, it's about our online presence. It's about how we do things in our online worlds. And one of the key findings of this in the result, because the question was, what is your perception of or the appeal towards having more control and ownership about what happens with your identity online? And 91% basically said that it was either very appealing or appealing. There's a greater desire, greater awareness of not just security concerns, but misuse of information concerns. And there's a greater desire to actually take a bit of control and ownership over what that looks like, which again plays out. If we talk about how that works, then you guys are in the middle of actually facilitating that exchange and facilitating how this might work in real life. And the quote here is particularly what we did was quantitative research. So there's just over 1,000, well, there's about 1,250 people surveyed last year. But we also took some deep dives, some interviews with people, and some of the comments, and I'll refer to them a couple of times during the session, are particularly enlightening. So yes, I'd love more control, but it's really hard and confusing. That is a consistent and a common sort of reflection, which is played out here. Consumers have no idea how to protect themselves, and businesses on the flip side actually make it difficult to opt out. So there's some privacy concerns here in general about over-collection of information. New Privacy Act last year, we're yet to see the full impacts of that, but the onus is on organisations to actually only collect the information they need for the purpose of which that interaction is taking place. And we do see a systemic over-collection of information. I often use an example of, I'm not sure if they're still doing it, I might shame them, But there's a bus service which runs in one of the major cities in New Zealand from the airport to the city. And on the a big white bus on the outside, it says free Wi-Fi. And it's like, okay, I'm going to give this a try. So go in, and the first thing it does, I had to submit my information in order to get this free Wi-Fi. And I had to give them my name, my address, my occupation, my email, and my earnings. They wanted to know how much I earned. I said, what the is this? This is not free Wi-Fi. This is harvesting my information and giving me Wi-Fi. And needless to say, I didn't take it up. But that sort of practice, that's sort of at the extreme end, but it still happens. And we have marketing teams who are like obsessed with customer data and information. Let's not even touch on the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, who monetize that. There is a growing concern around how that information is used, but there's also barriers that organisations put in place. So the assumption is that, yes, I'm going to need you to register and I'm going to collect all the information that I think I might possibly be able to use in the future. And when you take that from the consumer perspective, this is where you start to hit these frustration points. So I do want to protect myself, but I don't know what I need to do. So 53% of people had no idea. On a scale of 1 to 10, this is the 0s to 5s. I don't know what I need to do to protect myself. So the average was 4.4 out of 10. That's very low on the scale of people actually knowing what they need to do. And then a second question, which was even more disturbing, is even if you did know what you wanted to do to protect yourself, what the principles were and how you need to do things, actually executing that, the ease of being able to do that, the ease of being able to opt out, the ease of being able to select, the ease of being able to share information with consent, it's almost impossible. So 65% of people are just saying it's hard, it's too difficult to do this, or there is no mechanism at all to do it, which is another common reflection. This is a poor reflection. Not so much of the cybersecurity industry, but the way that organisations manage data, and it does. It's security and cybersecurity has a key part to play in actually unlocking this and enabling this in a different way. There's a few sound bites that came. So a disconnect, generally not knowing what to do to stay safe. Knowing where to start. It's the information flow. So what do I need to know to be able to protect myself here? Passwords is a biggie. I hate passwords. They're a bane. And the whole idea of a strong password is an oxymoron. If you pick something which is difficult to guess, it's also extremely difficult to remember. And then you think about how many of these passwords do you need, because we still operate in silos. This is actually one of the goals of digital identity, is to seek how we collaborate together to actually reduce some of that impact. So I don't need to remember 50 passwords or use a proxy such as a password management tool. But yeah, a lot of frustration around passwords, and it tends to be, not so much now, but it certainly did tend to be the default. I was heartened to see some of the interest slides showing here, and the SSS people will tell you about it, where they're talking about passwordless authentication. It's easier than you think, and it is true, it is easier than you think. Well, actually, probably not you. You guys probably know how easy it is. But that's a huge reduction in friction if it's done right, and if it's done with consent, and if it's done properly. I won't go through the others. These slides actually in the material is going to be made available to you, so Leah and the team will be making all this information available, and actually I've got some website links as well, so you can access the research yourself, both years' research yourselves as well. This is the point about how organisations are using data and information. There's a lot of people who are angry or upset or disappointed with the way in which their information is harvested and then used against them, weaponised almost. And it creates a high degree of tension, a high degree of frustration. And that plays out, some of the detail of the research was looking at trust in different sectors. So you've got typically your likes of your financial institutions and your government agencies who tend to be higher on the trust scale. And then you've got your social media organisations and your app developers who are in single digits, literally, in terms of who trusts them with their information. So there is a call to action in this. This isn't something we can simply accept. It's something we actually need to do something about. So getting into some particulars of security. So what are people worried about? So there are general concerns about fraud. There's concern about scams being sucked in. And there's concerns about hackers. So it's the use of information, the access to information, particularly around financial stuff, but the same concerns exist around sensitive information such as medical as well. So people are concerned about it. And actually one thing that this industry has done, and the likes of CTNZ as well, who have a presence here too, that there is a high degree of understanding in the general public that there are bad things out there, and that action does need to be taken to keep yourself safe. So that's one message that absolutely has got through, but I've got some interesting nuances of that I'll touch on as well. The other concerns people have, and this is more about the sharing of information when you touch on here, it's the consented sharing of information. Not knowing, transparency is a huge deal when we talk about who has our data. Even talking about, if you talk with some of the supermarkets, for instance, who collect your loyalty information, one of the supermarket chains tends to use it itself and replay personalised custom offers to you. Another organisation sells that data. And we don't know. There's no disclosure of that, the fact that that information is being sold. And again, with the advance of our algorithmic technologies, what in theory is anonymised data actually might not be anonymised anymore in terms of the ability to actually identify who you are and target your information. So there's a degree of angst, it's fair to say, around what happens with information. And again, security and identity is one of the keys to be able to both unlock the benefits, but also enable the customers, enable the end users, enable the general population in our communities to actually operate in a way which is safe for them. We asked a question about who's responsible for protecting identity information and trust in general in the online space. Most people felt that the individual has a key role to play, and this is what I say about the messaging. It is getting through. People know not to share passwords. They know to use strong passwords, all of those sort of things. They find it difficult, but they know that that's what they're meant to be doing. So the individual, there's a degree of understanding about responsibility. There's some challenges in actually being able to execute that responsibility. From a government perspective, this was particularly fascinating. So the expectation is the government does have protections and legislations in place. The Privacy Act, the new Privacy Act is an example of that. But there's a whole bunches of legislation and regulation around the use of information, which is out there as well. And there is an understanding that there are some jurisdictional challenges when you're talking about organisations which aren't in New Zealand. But this is the key concern, is that people are unsure whether the government is actually playing an active role when it comes to protecting them as individuals from cyber threats and misuse of their information. And that's a perception, and in this case, perception is reality. If people are not sure what the government is doing, or if they're supporting what is happening, then there's a perception challenge and a trust issue which sits behind that. And then when it comes to individual companies and organisations, there's a general understanding that yes, I can opt out of spam, those sort of things. Everybody needs to have subscription, unsubscribed sort of services and those sort of things. There is some transparency about data sharing, but then there's also a high degree of frustration about things being lost in legal terms and conditions, which is basically butt-covering exercises. And obviously nobody reads them. They understand that organisations generally have teams which are looking after threat prevention, risk, cybersecurity, etc. But again, when it's all talk about people's perceptions, there's mixed feelings about whether organisations are doing that well. And I think that's probably an accurate reflection. The spectrum of how organisations deal with trust, privacy and security in their online presence is from the very basic, they've done the absolute minimum required and sometimes less than that, through to sort of leading edge, customer-centric, adaptive, all of those sort of things. So a wide spectrum of practice which is taking place in organisations. Some doing it well, some not doing it well. Now, this is one of the key points. So the question was whether businesses should be doing more about helping individuals be safe, helping individuals with consent, with trust, with identity management. And a significant shift from 2019 to 2020 of putting the expectation that businesses and organisations should be doing better with this. When we initially looked at the results of this survey, the researchers came to us and they said that they felt there was a degree of apathy around how people were treating privacy and security and trust in their online presence. And we pushed on that because it didn't feel right. Apathy didn't feel like the right word to use. And when we started to do some of those in-depth interviews with individuals who'd completed the survey, it actually turns out that the challenge was not so much apathy, it was a cognitive burden that was being placed on individuals to understand the complexities of everything, and a feeling of overwhelm when it came to that. So I'm expected to protect myself, but I actually am not equipped and not knowledgeable, and I don't have the time to be able to do this for every single organisation that I engage with. So the cognitive burden we have probably unconsciously placed on the consumer. And what we need to be doing as organisations, and this is our challenge, what we need to be doing as organisations, as professionals, is actually taking that cognitive burden off the individual and doing the heavy lifting ourselves. And you guys, believe it or not, are the heavy lifters when it comes to this. When it comes to creating those ecosystems of trust and management and security and prevention, you guys are the front line when it comes to this. And enabling your organisations to be able to serve your customers better by taking that burden, that overload, off the end user is something that we should all be doing better at. And a very simple example of this, we do, if I've got a critique or a challenge perhaps to the industry as it currently stands, we're still seeing a lot of silos. And there's a degree of that which is prudent risk management. You need to take responsibility for your own domain. But what that means is you've got this proliferation problem, where if I'm engaging with 15 or 20 different commercial organisations, I've got 15 or 20 different mechanisms which I need to manage myself in order to secure my information and do business with those people. There's a massive opportunity for collaboration in this. But that collaboration needs to be trusted. I'll talk about a word in a moment that's on your bingo card. It needs to be trusted, it needs to be secure, but it also needs to be informed. There's a degree of education that we need to do to the general population and communities around what it means and how we can go about trusting each other. And the word that I was referring to is zero trust. So zero trust is you would have all heard it said many times from a podium, zero trust. My problem with zero trust is not the concept. The concept of zero trust is absolutely solid and firm. The challenge is you go and talk to the person on the street and say, I'm going to talk to you about zero trust. And it's like, what? So I don't trust anything. It's in my view, personal view, is a poor use of language. It actually conveys the opposite meaning to what it says. It's actually a high trust environment that we're talking about, not a zero trust environment that we're talking about. And I understand the technicalities of why the term was formed that way. The term makes sense to professionals like you, doesn't make sense to members of the public, and our language should be consistent when we're talking about this stuff. Education is a key role. And this comes down to one of our key challenges and messages. And this is in the overview of the research, and I've got the link on the next slide as well. So identity, when we're talking about how people engage and interact with us, it is a taonga. It's something precious. It's something that's worthy of care, dignity, and respect. And all too often, we as organisations, or even as individuals, treat our identity flippantly. And some of the results of that are the mess that we see around us at the moment, the threats which are prevalent because we don't treat that information and that identity with dignity and respect and care. And I've got a quote from Maya Angelou: do the best you can until you know better, then when you know better, do better. So the research and how we've used this research this year in particular has been that call to organisations and professionals like yourselves is take on that challenge, take on that burden of making things simpler for people and communities to understand, so that they don't have to do that heavy lifting themselves, because we know the results of that is that you reach this point of overload where actually our systems fall down because they're too complicated to understand and they're too complicated to put our trust in. So we've got to do better when it comes to increasing transparency. There's meaningful controls, meaningful privacy controls, straightforward policies, plain language, and not necessarily plain English either. Be careful not to use that term because some of our communities, English isn't a first language. And enabling people to take meaningful, informed action, but helping them along the journey to do that, that's really our key challenge. And like I say, the heavy lifters are you guys in this room here. And it's you who need to be enablers and equippers of people in terms of making this a reality and actually easing and doing better for everybody. The identity and trust information, and you will get these links. We've got a knowledge hub, digitalitentity.nz, and there's a bunch of resources and material there, including both years of research, but a whole lot of webinars. We've done some Tech Week TV sessions as well to encourage you to go and look. A number of you are active participants in some of the forums we have, so encourage you to do that. My contact details you'll get there as well. But yeah, the primary one would be to look at Digital Identity New Zealand. We've literally got 2 minutes. I've said what I wanted to say. I could say a whole lot more, but conscious of opportunity, if anyone has any particular questions or challenge or something they want to add, yeah, please feel free. Otherwise, it's going to be morning tea time. Georgia, are you coming up at the end? Okay, excellent. Great. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your attention.